So, what do the results say, doctor?
Well, overall things look pretty good, but there's one small thing we should discuss.
Everyone in the room held their breath as the dying dog wrapped his paws around his owner's neck in one final embrace. Tears streamed down faces. Everyone braced for the end, until the vet looked closer. Then she gasped and shouted, "Stop!" What she discovered in that moment turned a heartbreak into a miracle no one ever expected. The small room was so quiet you could hear the faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. A single blanket was spread across the cold metal table, and on it lay Max, a once strong German shepherd whose fur was now patchy and dull. His chest rose and fell in shallow, ragged breaths, each one sounding more labored than the last. His owner, Daniel, sat hunched beside him, his hand gently stroking the dog's ears. Tears clung to his lashes, blurring the outline of the animal he'd raised from a puppy. "You've been the best friend I ever had," Daniel whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry it has to be like this." Max's eyes flickered open at the sound, cloudy, but still searching for the voice he loved. Slowly, as though it took all the strength left in his frail body, he lifted his head and nudged Daniel's wrist. The touch nearly undid him. A sob broke free from Daniel's chest, and he leaned forward until his forehead rested against Max's. Behind them, the vet and a veterinary nurse stood silently, giving them space to say goodbye. The nurse discreetly wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She'd seen this moment so many times, but it never got easier. Then, with a tremor in his limbs, Max did something no one expected. He lifted one paw, then the other, and carefully wrapped them around Daniel's neck. In that final embrace, it was as if he was saying, "Thank you for everything." Daniel's shoulders shook as he clung to Max's thinning frame, his tears soaking into the coarse fur at the dog's neck. "I love you," he whispered over and over, the words breaking each time they left his lips. He had prepared himself for this day, rehearsed what he would say, but nothing could soften the ache of knowing it was the last time he'd feel that warmth. Max's breathing hitched, his sides rising in uneven jerks. Even so, he kept his paws hooked around Daniel's neck, refusing to let go. The vet stepped closer, her expression gentle but resolute. She held the small syringe in her hand, the liquid inside shimmering beneath the fluorescent lights. "I'm ready when you are," she murmured, her voice hushed as if louder words might shatter the fragile moment. Daniel lifted his head just enough to look into Max's tired eyes. "You can rest now," he choked out, his palm resting over the dog's fluttering heart. "You were so brave, so good." Max let out a small whine, almost a sigh. His tail moved once in a slow, weak arc across the blanket. The nurse stepped forward and placed a comforting hand on Daniel's shoulder, trying to steady him. Just as the vet positioned the needle near Max's leg, she paused. A small crease formed between her brows. She leaned down, studying the dog's chest as if she'd heard something that didn't belong. For a moment, the entire room felt like it was holding its breath. The vet's frown deepened as she carefully set the syringe back on the metal tray. She pressed her stethoscope against Max's ribs, her eyes fixed on the second hand of the wall clock as she listened. The nurse looked at her, puzzled. "Is something wrong?" she whispered, almost afraid to interrupt. Daniel wiped his face with the back of his sleeve, confusion tightening his features. "What is it? What's happening?" His voice cracked, raw from crying. "Hold on," the vet murmured, adjusting the stethoscope. She closed her eyes, concentrating. The faint, irregular beat she'd expected in a dying dog wasn't there. Instead, she heard something different, an uneven but persistent rhythm that sounded less like a failing heart and more like a system fighting to stay alive. Max let out a slow exhale, his body sagging into the blanket, but his heartbeat thumped on. Determined, the vet gently lifted his lip, checking the color of his gums. They were pale, but not the grayish tone of imminent death. She turned to the nurse. "Get me a thermometer and pull up his file again," she instructed quickly. "I want to check his temperature and review the blood work." Daniel's eyes darted from her to Max, hope warring with disbelief. I don't understand. You said he was dying. The vet met his gaze squarely. I thought he was, she admitted, her voice steady. But something isn't adding up. Before we do anything, we need to be absolutely sure. The nurse moved fast, retrieving the thermometer and unlocking the computer at the counter. The vet slid the device under Max's front leg, counting silently while she watched the display. When it beeped, she read the number twice to be sure. His temperature is too low, she said under her breath. Not because of organ failure, but possibly because of severe infection. She turned to Daniel, her eyes sharp with urgency. When did you first notice he was sick? Daniel swallowed hard, trying to think past the fog of panic. A few days ago, he stopped eating, was really tired. I thought it was just old age. His voice cracked again. He's been through so much. I didn't want to make him suffer. The vet laid a reassuring hand on his arm. You did the right thing bringing him in, but this doesn't look like simple aging. If this is an infection or poisoning, we may be able to treat it. Max shifted slightly, a faint whimper rumbling in his throat. It was as if he knew he still had a chance. The vet gestured to the nurse. Set up 4 fluids and broad-spectrum antibiotics. We don't have time to wait for new labs. Daniel felt his chest tighten with sudden, wild hope. So, he might survive? The vet nodded firmly. If we act quickly, yes. She turned back to Max, her voice gentle but resolute. Hang in there, old boy. We're not giving up on you yet. Daniel sat on a narrow bench just outside the treatment room, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. Every few minutes he looked up when he thought he heard footsteps, hoping someone would come tell him it was over, one way or the other. Hours slipped by, marked only by the quiet tick of the wall clock and the hum of machines. Daniel pressed his palm over his eyes, trying to block out the memory of Max wrapping those frail paws around his neck. He had thought that was their last moment. Now he didn't know what to think. Sometime past midnight, the vet stepped out. Fatigue was etched into her features. She sank onto the bench beside him. He's stable, she said softly. But the next few hours are critical. If he responds to the antibiotics, he has a real chance. Daniel let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. His voice came out as a whisper. Thank you for not giving up. The vet's tired smile was genuine. He wasn't ready to say goodbye, and neither were you. Daniel nodded, wiping his eyes. I'm staying right here until he wakes up. He sat slumped against the wall, exhaustion tugging at him, but he couldn't close his eyes. Every time he blinked, he saw Max's face, the way those paws had wrapped around his neck like a final goodbye. A soft creak broke the silence. He lifted his head, heart leaping when he saw the vet standing in the doorway, her expression transformed. She looked tired, but she was smiling. You should come in, she said gently. He's awake. Daniel felt his legs tremble as he rose. He gripped the door frame for balance before stepping into the treatment room. Max lay on a fresh blanket, the 4 still taped in place. His eyes were open, warm brown and clear, and when he saw Daniel, his tail thumped the table in a slow, tired wag. Hey, buddy, Daniel whispered, voice breaking. He reached out, resting his palm against Max's cheek. The dog pressed into the touch, letting out a soft, relieved sigh. He's not out of the woods, the vet cautioned. But he's fighting, and that's more than we could have hoped for last night. Daniel nodded, tears blurring everything again. He leaned close until his forehead touched Max's. You weren't ready to go, he whispered. I should have known. Max shifted and, with great effort, lifted one paw to rest against Daniel's arm. It wasn't goodbye. It was a promise. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe. Join us for more true stories that prove kindness can change lives.